Hello and welcome to Beyond the Blueprint. I am your host, Jeff O'Donnell. Today I'm joined by Jen Henderson, the founder and owner of Henderson Professional Engineers. Jen's firm is a powerhouse in land development and was recently recognized as one of the fastest growing firms in her region. Jen, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I'm excited to have this chat today.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to have you. So, Jen, you've said that engineering chose you. You grew up playing in the gutters during rainstorms, fascinated by flow and water, but you also mentioned you didn't realize you were poor until you got to college. So, how did that upbringing shape your grit and the way you lead your firm today?
It taught me the value of hard work and it taught me how, you can't judge a book by its cover as well. Just because someone doesn't look the same or act the same doesn't mean they're not. They can
Right.
be just as intelligent or more intelligent than you. But if you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, they'll help you be a smarter and more capable human as well.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you there. So, you told me a story about a massive turning point early in your career. The very first project your boss allowed you to seal. A client actually called and said he didn't want a woman seal on his plans. Your boss had a legendary response to that. Can you take us back to that moment and tell us what that taught you about the kind of loyalty you now expect in your own business?
Sure. Let me kind of set the stage for you a little bit. So, I
Perfect.
was working in a smaller firm. There was one engineer with a seal. He was teaching me the ways and teaching me, what to do and what not to do on a plan set. And so, my entire business is drawing construction plans. That's what we do. To finalize a construction plan set, you have to put a seal on it with a signature. The
Mhm.
person whose name is in the seal gets to sign that plan set. And really, what that says is you fully agree with everything that's on it, that you've done the calculations, you know that this is going to be good for the health, safety, and well being of the general public, that the project can be constructed in this way and the owner is going to be happy with that product. Well,
Right.
so I did all the calculations. I believed in this development. It was a small multifamily development, and the owner called and said, he talked to my boss and he said, "I don't want a woman to seal my plan set." And my boss said, "Well, why don't you come in and talk to us? Why don't, we're willing to hear you out. Maybe there's something we can change to make you happy." And
Mhm.
so he said, "Fine, I'll come and sit down with you." And we sat in the conference room. There were three of us in the room. It was me, the owner, and my boss. And
Mhm.
my boss said, "Okay, here's the plan set. It's sealed, it's done, it's finished, it's fully permitted. What is it that we can change to make you happy?" And that owner said, "Well, I don't want a woman to seal my plan set. That's the only thing that I see that's wrong with it." And my boss said, "Well, if that's the only thing that's wrong, you can find a new engineer. If that's what you're really complaining about, then I have nothing I can do for you." And the owner said, "Well, if you're not gonna seal it, that's fine. I'll find a new one." And my boss said,
Wow.
"Okay, see you later." And he got up
Wow.
and he walked out of the room, and I was devastated. It
Yeah.
it hurt my heart that someone could look at me and judge me purely for my gender and
Right.
not see that their plan set was something that I really put a lot of time and effort in.
Yeah.
And, I drive by that site every now and then, and he still hasn't built it.
Oh, really? Hey.
Yeah, and that was 20 years ago that this happened, and it's
Oh,
still a
wow.
vacant piece of property. So, that
Wow.
that really just tells me that it wasn't me. He didn't
Right.
wanna build it, but
Yeah.
that's the excuse he gave me, which, you know, really lit a fire in my soul.
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that story. That's such a great story.
Yeah,
Um, so you're in the industry where only 11% of the workforce is female.
that's
You
right.
mentioned that you often feel the need to be more overprepared than anyone else in the room. What does that preparation look like for you when you're walking into a high stakes development meeting?
You know, I have to know the ordinances backwards and forwards. I have to, be able to recall things, at the drop of a hat. And so For me, it looks like I have to go over the plan sets more thoroughly. I have to look at the ordinances. I have to be super knowledgeable. I can't crack jokes like some of my counterparts can,
Right.
because they just don't come across the same way. And it's really because they're not expecting that.
Right. Yeah. That's too bad, to be honest. That's not a good thing. um, so business is booming. You're the ninth fastest growing firm in the area, but you mentioned that your bus is full. Every seat is taken and everyone is at capacity. In an industry where everyone is headhunting, how do you manage that growth without burning out the loyal team you've worked so hard to build?
So I won't say that we're at capacity because we can still take on some more projects, but you know, um, we're having to pivot a lot with the way we do our work. People are having to take on administration roles that don't typically do that. Um, you know, we have to be more well-rounded in the whole process. Every employee has to be more well-rounded. And so
Right.
that's really what we do. I'm actively hiring, and so that I'm seeing that people really want more money than is than the job would allow. They
Okay.
want their salary to be higher than the job that they're applying for. And so
Right.
that's been a little bit of a challenge. And, when I see that, it just tells me that it just is the way of this area,
Hmm.
and it'll flip. There's going to come a time when people will accept less, and that's
Yeah.
okay, but we just have to make do with what we have. And sometimes that means we have to go overseas for our employees. Sometimes we have to pivot and allow some remote work for our employees. But the more flexible we can be as a
Hmm.
business, the more flexible my employees are, which means they work harder. you
Right.
know they may work
Yeah.
harder on Saturday, and that's okay, you
Yep.
know? And that's not the way it always was. When I was
Right.
growing up, most professional work got done Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So having to pivot has been an interesting challenge, but it's been
Hmm.
so fun as well. You know,
Yeah.
I told you that I've got children myself,
Hmm.
and one of the things that I really focus on is being present and accountable for my kids and their things. And so
Hmm.
when you work for a big firm, you can't go to, the party at 2 p.m. But when you
Right.
work in a place like mine, you can say, "Hey, I have a party at 2 p.m. Can I morph my schedule today? And I'll
Right.
work later." And it works so much better.
Absolutely.
People work harder that way.
Yeah. No, flexibility is definitely key in today's world for sure.
Yeah.
Now, if I could give you a wand today and you could wave it over your office to automate or eliminate one specific part of the engineering workflow, that repetitive grunt work that keeps your team 100% capacity, what would you get rid of to give your engineers their time back?
Man, if someone were there to answer the phone and give people answers, that would be so awesome. It just
Yep.
that's the hardest thing is, knowing what to say when people call because you never know who's calling. It could
Hmm.
be, people who want to come and inspect my roof, which I probably get 5 of those calls a day. There's
Right.
people who call and they want me, to design something that I don't do. You know,
Right.
for example, a structural foundation, that's not in my wheelhouse. I know
Hmm.
about them. I know how to do that, but I don't that's not what my bread and butter is. So if
Right.
I had, someone to screen those calls, man, that would be so nice.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be a huge thing for sure. Now you're a big believer in philanthropy and being open in an industry where people sometimes refuse to talk to each other. Why is that open door philosophy so vital for the future of land development?
You never know where your next client's gonna come from. I've done different development work for, bankers, for people I met at, well, we had a tornado here, and We one of the groups I'm with, the Rotary Club, we went and served meals to a group of people who just needed their front yards cleaned because it was a bad tornado. Well, one
Right.
of those was also a developer that I had never met, and we've done a couple of projects together now.
Oh, wow, that's so good.
Yeah, and just being a good person and a good human, helps everybody.
Mhm.
It people remember you when you do good things.
Absolutely. And the world needs more good people, that's for sure.
Oh, that is so true.
Yeah.
So true.
So, Jen, now if people want to learn more about the work you're doing at Henderson Professional Engineers, where's the best place for them to find you?
Go to my website, hendersonpe.com. That tells you a whole lot of things you need to know. Um, and you'll probably learn a lot more about me just looking there.
Awesome. That's great. So amazing. Well, that's all we have for this episode of Beyond the Blueprint. I want to thank our guest, Jen Henderson, for her insight and expertise. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I think that this is something that we don't talk about enough. And so I can't thank you enough for, reaching out and just saying, "Hey, let me share your story." So thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. So I'm your host, Jeff Woodall, and we hope to catch you on the next one.